My pleasure, and thanks for the opportunity. Good morning, everyone. Um, yeah, my name is Dan Kittredge. Oops, that's the wrong slide. Uh, I'm from Massachusetts. Um, I grew up on an organic farm in Barrie. My parents were actively involved in NOFA. I'm guessing some people here are familiar with NOFA. They helped write some of the first standards as for NOFA Mass. My mother was the founding executive director of NOFA Mass. My father was the editor of the Natural Farmer for 30 years, and they ran the summer conference, NOFA Summer Conference, for 25 years. So I grew up in the organic movement, community, etc., as it were, and yeah, managed the farm through college and into my 20s. And when I got married, had found no better lifestyle, I thought, than homesteading, both parents at home, minimal screens, just kids in nature, and tried to become a farmer like my parents, and realized what they had realized, which was that I was not a good enough farmer to make a living, which connects to things like pest pressure and disease pressure and failure to thrive of the crops. And so that's what started me on this path of looking outside of the organic rubric into what else is out there. And I found my way to Acres USA, which some people may have heard of. It's a brilliant network founded by Charles Walters about 50 years ago, where it was a really big tent integrating the perspectives of biodynamics and permaculture and agroecology and biochemistry and microbiology and quantum and indigenous perspectives, a really sort of a broad-based set of insights. And as I shifted my practices on my farm to integrate some of that perspective, still staying within the organic framework, I rapidly got to the point where pests were gone, diseases were gone, yields were up, cost of production was down, and I was making my living farming, working 20 hours a week. And that was something that I had been, I'd not seen in all my experience in the organic movement, was actually to be able to make a living farming and not be working all the time and actually have free time. And so at that point in time, I felt this obligation to start talking about the things that I thought I was understanding and seeing, and founded an educational organization called the Bionutrient Food Association. At that point in time, 2010, this slide's out of date because that was 16 years ago, not 14 years ago, but with a specific focus on the nutritional caliber of food. One thing I'd learned at Acres was about Brix, about the refractometer. People may have heard about the refractometer and how you can use it to measure plant health by squishing the leaf and checking the Brix reading of the leaf. Well, you can also use it to measure nutrient levels in food by squishing the carrot or the cucumber or the tomato and getting a drop of that juice on the refractometer. And lo and behold, there's a nutrient variation in food, which apparently is actually quite significant, which connects to things like flavor, aroma, human health, pest and disease resistance, soil health, farm viability. I was like, my God, isn't that the point? Isn't the point of organic to have food that's better? That was what I thought was what was the whole point of our culture and community, but we weren't actually with certifications talking about nutrients. We were talking about practices. And so when I started learning about these things, I asked the question to my elders in that network, what's the word for this thing, which is the variation in nutrient levels in food? This is 2007 or so. And they said, well, we don't really have one. And I said, how could there not be a word for this thing? This is what the permaculturalists are pretty sure they're talking about. It's what the biodynamic people are pretty sure they're talking about. It's what the organic people are pretty sure they're talking about. It's what the locavores are pretty sure they're talking about, food being better. But we don't actually have a term, a way of actually assessing it and measuring it. And in that process, in that conversation, we coined this term nutrient density to refer to that variation in nutrient levels in food. And so, yeah, that's been my work professionally for the last now more than 15 years, is to bring forth this conversation, the techniques, the practices, and then the metrics and measurements and ways of helping the whole system organize around the quality of the food as the center of the conversation. So yeah, I'm standing here in my professional hat today, running the organization. Our mission is increasing quality in the food supply And by increasing quality, we're talking about flavor, aroma, nutritive value. We are not talking about aesthetic and volume. And, it's about the inherent foodness of the food. I think I can twist a word from another. Our original work organizationally started again in 2010, teaching courses, giving workshops, hosting a conference. Our conference is called the Soil and Nutrition Conference. You can find a recording of every presentation from every year on our YouTube page. We've thought that the insights are pertinent and should be shared. We have organizationally many hundreds of hours of stuff there. But what happened as we started to teach these courses for growers here in the Northeast, and then it sort of spread through word of mouth across the continent and then to other continents, was it didn't really seem to matter what the scale or the crop or the soil type or the climate zone was. By working more well with nature, which plants have been doing for hundreds of millions of years, by having the farmers understand how to work more well with nature, cost of production went down, soil health improved, pest and disease resistance improved, flavor, aroma, shelf life improved. We thought, this is pretty cool. We think we can solve the issues of climate and chronic disease and a whole bunch of other stuff through working more well with nature. It seems like this leverage point could be the nutritional caliber of food. How would we bring this conversation to scale? How could we facilitate empowered transition of more farmers in more places more rapidly? And the idea basically was by supporting people who buy food in being able to discern the relative quality of the sources they have on the shelf. So people, I'm sure, have gone to the grocery store. If you're a proper farmer, you don't like going to the grocery store, but I'm sure every now and then some of us do. If you look at the 3 choices of apples or the 4 choices of potatoes, imagine if you could know of these potatoes here are 20 out of 100 nutritionally. These are 40, these are 60, these are 80. If you knew that, would you be more likely to buy the 80 than the 20? If you could choose between the options of beef or milk or rice, onions, if you knew these were 20 over here and these were 80, and it didn't necessarily connect to organic or local or anything else, it was just like the inherent nutritional caliber. Our thought is people actually use money to buy food lots of the time, and they actually want the best for themselves and their families with the food they buy. So if we could facilitate a dynamic where people could know the relative nutritional caliber of the food they purchase, that could shift through economic incentive the dynamics of agriculture at large. So that was the grand vision. If we can facilitate that dynamic, we could facilitate this shift in agriculture practice, which could reverse climate change, reverse chronic disease, et cetera. So grand vision. We started this work in 2017 with 3 basic questions. And the first question would be, how could someone know that this is 20, this is 80 out of 100? And the idea was through a science called spectroscopy, which is effectively what the Hubble Space Telescope and the James Webb Telescope and a bunch of other things NASA's built do. It's how they can read something 14.3 billion light years away. Anybody know how far a light year away is? A light year? No. Who's heard of the Voyager 1 and Voyager? Like, they left in the 1970s. They're the things that have gone farthest away of anything ever. Like, they'll be a light day away, the one that's farthest away, I think at some point this year. Voyager 1 will be 1 light day away from us later this year. It took off in 1977. How do we know what stars 5 light years, 50 light years, 50 million light years? How can we read the atmosphere of planets 10,000 light years away? It's a science called spectroscopy. Everything in chemistry, copper or zinc or protein or polyphenols, vitamin D, everything in chemistry is a vibration in physics. So spectroscopy is a science where basically we take a picture of the light coming off of something and we know what it is. And our thought was, if we can read the nature of a star light years away, can we read the nature of a carrot a millimeter away? That was our proposal about how we could shift the way the market works, is by giving people scientific instruments in their hands with which they could actually discern the relative quality of food. So that was our first question was how. Second question is what. How. What is the scale of nutrient variation in food? We looked through the literature. We couldn't find any proper, assessments of what is the nutrient variation in food. The third question is what causes nutrient variation. So we started a research project in 20. Well, we designed it in 2016. 2017, we built our first meter. 2018, we built our first lab. That year, we had people sending in carrots and spinach from across the country. We had our first lab was in Michigan. We wanted people to send in samples from their farms, from farmers markets, from grocery stores, organic, not organic. We wanted to survey the supply chain, send in carrots and spinach from as many different places as possible. We will run them through a lab and see what the nutrients are in them. Second year, we set up our second lab at Chico State University in California. That was 2019. That year, we got up to 6 crops. We looked at the soil the crops grew in. So you'd take the tomatoes in triplicate and then take the soil in triplicate at multiple depths. And then we'd ask all the management questions. What was the variety? Where did you source it? When did you plant it? How did you prepare the soil? What was the fertility program? So as much metadata as possible, management practices overlaid against the soil metrics, overlaid against the nutrient levels. 2020, we set up our third lab in Europe. That year, I've got the graphic here. We had, what were the numbers? 3,800 samples. You can see all the different types of crops. Each one of those green dots is a farm where the farmers were sending in the crops in triplicate, the soil in triplicate, the management data. The orange dots were citizen scientists pulling things off the shelf and sending them in. You can see under food, it says the nutrients we're looking at in the crop. Under soil, you can see the metrics we're assessing in the soil. At the end of this process, we had about 10,000 crop samples, about 8,000 soil samples. We had a pretty significant database that looked at the nutrient variations in food, what seemed to be causal factors. And with our little handheld meter we built in 2017, we were able to flash a light at each one of those crops. So we could overlay the spectral signature against the nutrient levels. So I'm gonna spend a couple of minutes here talking about what we found in the food, because I think this is pertinent. You have sulfur on your left. Okay, so I think it's 4.92. This is a little bit small. I can't quite even read it. Let me see if I can full screen this. Nope, I messed something up. There we go. 8.41 is the bottom left corner. That's 8.41 milligrams per 100 grams of fresh weight. This is sulfur in carrots. See that? All right, I see what I've done. Now you can't see the whole slide. Um, 8.41 is the bottom, 30 on the left, 33.19 is on the right. That means the carrot that had the lowest level of sulfur had a quarter as much as the one with the highest level of sulfur. So there's it's a 4-to-1 variation. You can see the red, orange, yellow, light green, dark green. Those are the fifths of the range. So if the lowest level was 0 and the highest level was 100, that breaks it up in 20th percentile ranges. The vast majority of the samples are below the 50th percentile. See that line that goes down in the middle of the yellow? That would be 50 out of 100. So you can see that of all the carrots we sampled, way more were in the bottom half of the sulfur level than the top half. Yeah. On the right is phosphorus. What's that numbers? I can't read it. 11.7, 93.69. That's an 8-to-1 variation. The farthest ones over in the green have 8 times as much phosphorus as the ones on the right. The peak of the curve there is in we call that the 27th percentile. Anybody here go to college? Yeah. Okay. High school, university. Have you ever gotten a grade at school? Because when I went to school, we had grades, and it was like anything in the 90s as your final grade was an A of some sort. Anything in the 80s was a B. Anything in the 70s was a C. Everything in the 60s was a D. And anything below 60 was an F. Yeah? So if we do that, the dark greens are the A's and B's. The light greens are the C's and D's. And the reds, oranges, and yellows are the F's. So if we just look at the potential of what the nutrient levels could be in a carrot, and we look at what the supply chain says is available to people, what we can say is that the vast majority of the samples that we collected were failures, right? In relation to what's possible, most of the food that we have available to us is quite low from a nutritional standpoint in relationship to what it could be. This is just one element in one crop. We've got all of our data from all of our crops on our website, bionutrientinstitute.org. You can look at all the reports. There's data explorers. You can overlay biodynamic versus genetics versus no-till and see what the data sets were. Everything's completely open that we've collected. I'm just going to run through a few more slides here. Just carrots, I've got slides here for. We've got slides like this for more than 20 crops. This is what we found in our preliminary work, the nature of the supply chain. Antioxidants is the next one. This is the 4.92 to 196. That's a 40 to 1 variation. The ones on the far ones over the edge of the green have 40 times as many antioxidants as the ones at the edge of the red. That's not 4%, that's 40. Antioxidants, people heard about antioxidants? They're supposed to be good for you? Yeah. You've heard blueberries are supposed to be high antioxidant crop? Guess what? The graph on blueberries and antioxidants looks just like this. Almost all blueberries have remarkably low levels of antioxidants. Not all blueberries are uniform. Not all humans are uniform. Not all cows are uniform. Right? We have this concept, it's a carrot, it's a carrot, it's a carrot. Actually, no. Actually, we're wired with really sophisticated nutrient monitoring systems. Anybody know about this? Called noses and tongues. God gave you, nature gave you inbuilt the capacity to discern what's good for you and what's not. Things that have more flavor, have more nutrients, are more health giving, cause you to be more vigorous and vital, cause your children to be better. Who's about epigenetics? Who knows about the health of the mother affects the health of the baby? If you eat food which is insufficient, you become degenerate. Your children are less well than you were. That's where we're at, it seems now, in human culture. After multiple generations of eating the products of agribusiness, we are becoming degenerate. It's quite an issue. Anyway, I'll proceed forward. Polyphenols, 2.34, 49.75. That's a 20x variation. Peak of the curve in the 7th percentile. These are the things we call flavor and aroma. These are the things that, in the olden days, before they invented pharmaceuticals, medical, healers prescribed, herbs and spices. Those things with strong aromas and flavors have intense levels of these plant secondary metabolites, these health-giving compounds. We've got the data, we've got the science that shows that these things we call flavor are actually the anti-cancer, anti-diabetes, heart disease, all the things like that destroy disease in us. Like these compounds, these things we call flavor and aroma are actually what does it in nature. The 7th percentile is the peak of the curve of the polyphenols. The vast majority is below the 30th percentile. What could be in carrots is not in most carrots. People pay attention to their coffee and their wine and their, like the notes, right? Anybody heard about this? The terroir. How about your cucumbers? How about your tomatoes? How about your beef? Right? Food is medicine, like has direct connection to the nutritional caliber. It's not just was it whole food. Whole food's a hell of a lot better than processed stuff. But actually, what is in the food itself has a direct connection to the impact on your being. And what is most of the supply chain right now is embarrassingly poor. One thing we farmers need to understand is most of us are not doing that good of a job. So that's just what we're finding from our survey of the supply chain across multiple continents, across multiple years. This is just fruits roots, leaves, and grains. We'll get to animal products in a minute. But yeah, okay. So now the next question is what causes it? Here we have on the left genetics. You've got Napoli, Bolero, Nantes, Mokum, Romance. Anybody who's grown carrots knows those varieties. There's a lot more reds than there are light greens in Napoli. Oh, there's 2 dark greens in Mokum, right? I'm not seeing any connection there between genetics and nutrient levels. What I see is somebody can take a Bolero and put it in this soil and get low levels of nutrients, and a Bolero in that soil and get high levels of nutrients. Is Angus beef better? Or is it what the Angus cow eats that has an effect on the health giving attribute of its meat? It's not genetics that seem to be causal in nutritional caliber of food from our data. Next, we've got by bioregion, these are USDA climate regions, Northeast, East, North, Central, Southeast, Southwest, Southwest. On top, there's Northeast. Because we're from the Northeast, because a lot of our allies in the Northeast, and they're small, organic, no-till, regenerative, polyculture farmers, they sent in their samples because they thought that they were going to find that they're doing well. How many do you see in the dark green? And how many do you see in the orange? This is like us organic farming movement, local, homesteader people, right? Across the board, we're not seeing any bioregion in the US connecting to really better crops. We're seeing mediocre everywhere. It doesn't seem like soil type, doesn't seem like climate zone is actually causal in nutrient levels in food. It's not genetics, it's not soil, it's not climate. Next is point of purchase. On top is farm. Then we've got store. Then we've got garden. Then we've got farmer's market. Just because, store's got the highest, which maybe had crops from a farmer locally, but that was purchased at a store. It didn't come from the farm directly. The farmer's sending it in. Just because you grow things in your garden doesn't make them better. Just because you buy from your local friendly farmer doesn't make their crops highly nutritious. The last one's the worst, or the best, depending on whether you like killing sacred cows or being part of a dogma. Certified organics on top. People who use cover crops is next. No tills after that. The 4th one is till. So 3 is no till, 4 is till. Then we have organic, not certified. Then see those 2 with the yellow where it's fatter? Reference and none is grocery store, not organic. Like, these are called violin graphs. Like, it's basically like you can see where they're fatter, and that's where the preponderance of the data is. Like, it's uncomfortably true based on our data that just because a farmer is not organic, just because the crop came from a grocery store does not mean it's worse. It's averaging in the yellow, which is like between 40th and 60th percentile. It's not exceptional. It's just that a lot of us are doing worse than that. Right after those 2 is regenerative. Definitely lower. If you pray down to Mecca 5 times a day, does that make you closer to God? If you say 5 Hail Marys, does that make you closer to God? Is it the actions? Is it like the going through the motions? Or is it the deep inner humility and connection? Like, if you go through the motions every day, okay, I'm going to go through these motions, check a box, therefore I'm a good Catholic, therefore I'm a good Muslim. Or is it being sensitive and humble in all moments? What I think we're seeing here is all the I call them dogmas, the religions in the movement. We're permaculturalists, we're better, we're biodynamic. Sorry, we are the best, right? Organic, we know God has chosen us. Regenerative, like all the cool kids are regenerative. Like we can all, be part of a little tribe. We can all identify as I'm a grass farmer. Within all of these ecosystems, we have a full continuum of nutritional caliber of food. The only thing that we found that connected to nutrient levels of life in the soil. The function of the microbiome, right? The vitality of the bottom of the food chain, of all the metrics we looked at, of all the things we tried to parse out, it was a level of life in the system that connected to the level of nutrients in the food. Just because you're no-till doesn't mean you have high levels of soil life. If your soil's tight and there's no air, the microbes asphyxiate and they're dead, and the microbiome's not doing well, and it doesn't matter if you didn't till, the bottom of the food chain is not flourishing. If your soil's dry, there's no water, the microbes die of thirst. The bottom of the food chain is not functioning well. It's very difficult for anything above it to do well, right? I grew up in the organic orthodoxy. My parents wrote some of the first organic standards in the US. They ran the organic farming organization. Like we started the farmers market in 1986 in our local town. Like I should be telling you local and organic are better based on how I grew up, but I went to the university and I learned about this thing called science. I understand the principles of science. I think they're really valuable. I think if we're willing to be humble and we're willing to engage the scientific process holistically, that can be our lingua franca. We can solve this issue of the Tower of Babel where we're all speaking different languages and we know we're right and they're wrong, right? We can stop this tribalism and find, the spirit and the whole in the center. I think the scientific method is a very powerful process. So anyway, I digress. Thank you. I'm not digressing. I'm just being self-deprecatory. So nutrient variation is massive. Soil health seems to be what causes it. This is a picture of the app as it shows up on your phone and the meter that we built and we manufactured and we calibrated and we made hundreds of and shipped them around the world. In 2021, as a NGO, a small educational nonprofit, we were able to have engineered, calibrated, reproduced, built an app for, shipped around the world at $377, a handheld, consumer-priced flash of light nutrient meter. It is possible to hold something in your hand that you can flash a light at a carrot with, that you can afford, that can give you scientific results. This paper got published in a journal called Nature Scientific Reports. It's a Nature journal. It's like it got a decent level of credibility. It's not Nature, it's Nature Scientific Reports, but it is a Nature journal. So by 2021, proof of concept complete. Is it possible to have a handheld thing in people's hands that they could measure nutrient levels with? Yes. Is nutrient levels, do they vary massively? Yes. What causes them? Soil health. Okay, so our thesis now that we could save the world, we could reverse climate change, we could reverse chronic disease through using the market, which is a big, bad, evil thing, but is the way the world works with money, aligning with visceral self-interest of, I want my children to be healthy and I don't really care about anything else when my kids are sick. There's nothing more important to me than the health of my children. And this is something that I can do. So this is the grand vision and strategy. Now we have a basic question, because this meter is calibrated to individual nutrients, to antioxidants or to polyphenols. Those are nice, vitamin D, but that's not the carrotness of the carrot. And that's not the beefness of the beef. Those are just individual nutrients. How do you measure the overall quality of a thing? This is what we refer to in our conversation, nutrient density. This term, nutrient density, which we've created, we're trying to talk about this tomato versus that tomato, this carrot versus that carrot, the wholeness of it. And so this has been the work we've been, on for the last 4 years. We started with beef as the food stuff to focus on because we thought that beef was the thing that we humans produce through agriculture that has a larger ecological footprint than anything else. Right? There's more land on the planet used to produce beef than cucumbers or wheat or anything else. And we understand that the impact on climate and ecosystem function of agriculture is dramatic. And so if we want to reverse our impacts on climate function, on ecosystem function, focusing on a crop that has a significant footprint would be a place to start. So you can see our thesis here. Our thesis is that if cows eat what cows evolved to eat, they will be healthier, the system function will be better, and their impact on people who eat them will be better than if they eat what most cows who are raised in this country eat. Right? That should be a fairly comfortable hypothesis for everyone in this room. Here's the experimental design. This is a much more complex process. Instead of working on 2 continents, we worked on 4 continents with this one. I wanted to go for 6, but we're a small organization, and that's big visions. Every practitioner sent in a steak from 3 different animals, triplicate samples. We started off with 800 different metabolites in the meat, got down to about 150 when the final few runs of meat. Elements, enzymes, vitamins, fatty acids, polyphenols, terpenoids, alkaloids, like a whole bunch of different type of nutrients in the meat we looked at. In the manure, because everybody sent in a fecal sample, we looked at 200 different species of bacteria and RKE. We were also able to look at the species of the plants that were in the animal through the fecal sample. We had the farmers send in a fodder a sample, so whether it was a TMR or it was the hay or it was the monoculture pasture or it was the polyculture pasture, they had to sample it within the last 60 days before slaughter. Then they sent in the soil that the fodder grew in. Then they answered a whole bunch of management questions about the age and genetics and management practices and things like that. And then finally, we did human health trials. So feed people this beef and see what happens to them, feed them that beef and see what happens to them, and then feed them the fake meat and see what happens to them. Because according to the government, if you read the back of the package, they're all uniform, right? Grass-fed meat, corn-fed meat, and Impossible Burger, all of the exact same numbers in the back of the package. So do our bodies respond to them all uniformly? No, no, they don't. Okay, so that was the experimental design. Hundreds of farms. I think I've got the map here. Mostly North America. There's more than that in Australia. All kinds of bioregions, soil types, climate zones, management practices. This is actually, I give better slides. If you go to our website, bionutrientinstitute.org, you can see all the metadata, like every single sample and how it overlaid and everything else. But people have heard about the single omega-3, omega-6. Here we have, just broken out by grass-fed and grain-fed or finished. You can see that the average, the omega-6 omega-3 ratio in the grass-fed was 1.7 to 1. The range was 0.9 to 1 to 11.4. The ones that are circled there on top were from a company that sells hundreds of millions of dollars of beef, claiming it to be grass-fed in this country every year, whose supply chain got disrupted during COVID. And so they, instead of buying from the places they were normally getting it from, bought it from somewhere else who claimed the beef was grass-fed. And they sent it in part to see if their suppliers are telling the truth. And we can tell you that those samples do not look like the rest. We can also tell you that all cows at some point in their life eat grass. So it wasn't lying for the supplier to say this is grass-fed beef. I'm sure everybody here knows about the nuances of claims and nuances and the confirmation bias, what a person wants to hear when they see something, et cetera. There's a whole bunch of samples there that are grass fed, and they all look really, really similar. Right. The whole point of using instrumentation to assess is we can get through the marketing, we can get through the claims, we can get to a point where people can actually know and trust using science, hopefully in their hand. On the other side, on the left side, you can see the grain fed, a pretty broad range there in variation, omega 3, omega 6. Average 7.8 to 1, goes from 3.5 to 14.4. Guess what? You know, all, feedlot finishing is not uniform, right? Some places are, have a much more mixed and balanced diet. The cows are in there for less time. Some have a really heavy grain diet and they're in there for a while, right? So there's a massive variation here. Again, this is the point of nutrient level, nutrient density assessment, is like, it's not you are nutrient dense or are not. We're trying to stand back from that bifurcation, that reductionist, mechanistic, you are or are not black and white paradigm, to a continuum paradigm. There's one, there's 100, and everyone sits somewhere in the spectrum. So I would propose from a rhetorical standpoint, if someone says that they are nutrient dense, they're missing the point. What you can say is this is 60 out of 100 or 40 out of 100 in a nutrient density scale. But to say I am producing nutrient dense crops, like, that's just a statement, right? Our hope is we can get to a point where we actually can bring empiricism to this conversation, build calibrations, have instrumentations, and everybody can see 20, 40, 60, 80. That's what matters, not the word you're associated with it. Regenerative, right? That's the word of the decade. That's the ism. Everybody wants to claim regenerative. We're regenerative. Like, well, what is it? Well, we saw nutrient levels a minute ago. Just because you claim regenerative does not mean you have higher levels of nutrients. Anyway, this is just omega 3, omega 6. We are at the final stages of this research right now. I'll just do one last slide. Well, generally, I think if you talk to the anthropologists, they'll say that traditional human diets, averaged from 1 to 1 to 2.5 to 1, omega 3, omega 6. That's what we evolved to eat. The diet of our forebears that caused us to evolve to who we are had a much closer 1 to 1, 2 to 1 range of omega 3, 6 in our overall diet. And what grains have a lot of in them is omega 6s, which means if you're a organic pasture poultry, pasture pork operation, and 95% of the diet of your animals, or 80%, is grain, you have these 15 to 1, 10 to 1, 20 to 1 ratios in your certified organic pastured pork or certified organic pastured poultry. So there's a bunch of unpacking implications we can go into here. But effectively, the closer that ratio is to 1 to 1, the better it seems. This is just one biomarker. I want to move on because our definition of nutrient density is not just this one ratio. It's a whole bunch of other stuff, which I'll get to in a minute. But this is something people have heard about. Yep. Yeah. 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 Beautiful. Massive. Yep. 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 That's the point. Yep. And then how can we, what are conversations about diets for animals? I mean, it wasn't that long ago when pigs never ate grain. In the history of humanity, that's not a thing pigs ate, right? It just happens to be a byproduct of our industrial ag system that grains are so inexpensive, and that's what's normalized, and that's what's easy to mass produce and mass ship and everything else. So going back to, I mean, there's a whole other thing about, I mean, God, I could digress for a long time with what we found here. And, you know, a lot of the beef producers are like, thou shalt never cut a blade of grass. And what happens in the winter when you're out there grazing on brown, you know, stalks with seed heads is the cows don't gain weight well. Their omega-6 levels begin to rise, right? It takes, 24 months to 36 months to finish them. The meat is much more chewy and unpalatable, quote unquote. Whereas if you were to cut the grass when it was in, full flourishing in May or June and ensile it and feed it to cows in December, then you can get the 2 to 3 pounds a day of weight gain, and you can get the 1-to-1 omega-3 omega-6 ratio instead of 2-to-1, which is better. And you can get intermuscular fat, the marbling, and you can get the grading of the price, the choice and the prime. Who knows about lactic fermentation? Who's about kefir or, kimchi or sourdough? Having the microbes pre-digest food for you is like a thing we've learned is good for us. Ensiling a polyculture pasture strategically seems to be a really good way to, cause your slaughter age to be down more 14, 16 months, 18 months, 1-to-1 omega-6 3 ratio, great marbling. There's a whole conversation here about how we do things and what we're taught and what actually seems to work best based on the science. So there's sacred cows everywhere, right? Like thou shalt do this, thou shalt not do that. Like let's use science to guide us is the point. And let's use empiricism and let's share openly. Anyway, 15 minutes. Okay. Yeah. I knew I wouldn't have enough time. All right. Short answer. Diversity seems to correlate with quality. From an animal standpoint, the more species of plants you've got in the ecosystem, the better the omega-6 3 ratios are, et cetera. No, I'm sure surprise here for people. Quickly, I'll do 5 more minutes and then we'll do Q&A. So as an organization, we're in the process of writing our final papers. We have this thing called a bionutrient definition standards board. We got a bunch of beef scientists, researchers, specialists from all over the planet writing our papers. One paper is going to be direct connection from soil health, ecosystem function, animal health, human health, show that connect, complete scientific connect. And the other paper is the 8 biomarkers. There's 2 elements, there's 2 vitamins, there's 2 fatty acids, and 2 secondary metabolites. And so we're going to be publishing a definition of nutrient density in beef this year where you can measure these 8 nutrients and say, bam, this beef is the 15th percentile. Bam, that one's 23, that one's 74. So it's not just omega-3, omega-6, it's a full spectrum of biomarkers that correlate with everything from human health to ecosystem function. And that'll be our first definition of nutrient density. We hope to publish that, and we hope to inspire people who want to make money selling meters to take that information, calibrate meters with it, and start selling them to people. And taking that model, now we want to do that in other crops. So we just completed, depending on whether I guess we're in the US, a 60,000-mile, 6-continent tour in the last 3 months of last year. Not the last few months, September, October, November, 60,000 miles, 6 continents with what we're calling our global treaty and the definition of nutrient density. I've got a hard copy form here. This is the plan we're proposing for how we do the same thing for 20 more crops. If we can walk through this process of empirically defining nutritional caliber in food for potatoes, for wheat, for milk, for beans, apples, whatever, and establish that 1-to-100 standard, then that can be calibrated on instrumentation. Then we can have it, actually, it looks like it'll be one of the cameras in your phone. It sure looks like by 2030, there will be smartphone companies making phones with spectrometers in the cameras. So you open up the app, you go to the farmer's market, burp, burp, 20 out of 100, burp, burp, 80 out of 100. You go to Walmart, you go to Whole Foods. You go to Donald's, you go to the co-op. And you upload it onto the cloud. Not everybody has to buy a new phone. A few people buy the new phone. They take the testing. It goes into the cloud. Everybody gets to figure out where good and bad are. So that's a process we're in the midst of. Sarah, who works with me right there, is handing out some of the copies of the treaty. This is the 10-pager sort of broad strokes treaty. There's a 35-page with the appendices, which goes into it in detail. This is all on our website, bionutrientinstitute.org. If you find what you are reading to be something you support, we invite you to put your name on it, as in sign the treaty. We're in this process right now after having done the listening sessions and building that sort of the coalescing of this around the world, listening to people and making sure that their thoughts are considered. Now we're asking people to sign it, anyone and everyone. If you've got a Facebook page or an Instagram link or a website or credentials or a LinkedIn, and you can associate that, say, this person, my name, here's my web, profile that I'm willing to share to give sort of veracity to that name, sign it. Our hope is if we can get many, many people on this planet to sign that treaty, then we go to the funders, because this is an expensive project. This is we're ballparking it at $1.25 million a crop. That's 25 million for 20 crops. We think we can get this done in the 20 crops in 2.5 years. But this is only going to succeed if it comes from bottom up. And I think I'll stop there because I don't have much time left. Thank you very much. Oh, yeah. One last slide. We are an NGO, a nonprofit educational organization. We run on charitable donations. If you find what we're doing inspiring, $5 a month is the basic membership rate. That's a little QR code you can use if you want to. All right.
Can you hear me?
Oops. Sorry. Over here.
I have 2 questions for you. One is, I'm so glad that you're here because I had to choose between your conference today and tomorrow and this conference. So I'm glad you're here.
The one I'm doing in Rhode Island tomorrow, you mean?
In Rhode Island, yeah.
There's a big storm coming. We'll see if that one actually happens. Okay. But yeah.
But it's also happening today. So I'm glad I didn't have to choose between the two. The second question is a little context is we at UConn Extension, we've hired a soil health expert who focuses on soil health. And we have a new director for that department for plant science. And they're revamping the soil lab.
Yeah.
And they're adding new tests.
Beautiful.
And they want to do a comprehensive soil health test.
Yes.
And we've been talking about the biological health of soil, the biodiversity, the number of microbes in the teaspoon of soil. Is there any soil lab that has a really good comprehensive biological assessment test that we can copy at UConn?
We should have a conversation outside of this room on that topic. What is soil health? It's one of those terms that everyone throws around, everyone refers to. Yes, I'm working on soil health. Like, do you have metrics? Is there a uniform agreed upon definition of it? As far as I can tell, it's kind of still a bit fuzzy. So, I mean, I would like to think part of what we're doing with this process of defining nutrient density is finding the things that correlate, finding the biomarkers that correlate with the animal health, the human health, the soil health, and then we can identify proper metrics to measure. So, short answer is not that I know of, because I don't think we've got a proper definition of it. But I'd love to talk to you outside of this about that and collaborate if you're interested.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. 2 questions. One is, does your spectrometer do beef? In other words, could I buy and use it to examine my beef as a way to determine how good a job I'm doing?
That's question 1.
Yes.
And question 2?
Question 2 is mineralization, and using a mineralized compost product to, instead of trying to get into the mind, if you will, of the soil.
Keep the microphone.
Yeah. To get into the mind of the soil, but have a way of mineralization being available for the plant and the microbes to, again, create the environment that will give you the density you're
Got it. Yeah. So 2 questions. First question, no. The meter we built was a prototype, a really rudimentary, simple thing, which was, with which we could measure individual nutrients in a couple different crops. We're not a company. We are an educational organization. We built the meter only to make the point that this is a possible thing to do, not because we have any desire to ever be a meter company. What we want to do is the science with integrity to come up with the answer that anybody who has a meter company should use to build a meter that we should trust. And our thought is, if at some point, Apple and Samsung and Google build spectrometers into their phones, and two of them are calibrated to what we're doing and one of them is not, we tell people the Pixel, don't trust it, but the iPhone and the Galaxy do. We see our role as the ones who say, trust this tool because it's giving you the truth. Don't trust that one. We do not want to be a meter company ever. We have built a meter only to show it's possible. A. B, how do we facilitate optimal nutrient uptake and flow in the plants and everything else, in the animals? The way we're doing this research is we're collecting as much metadata from as many different operations globally as possible. And the idea is this all goes in the commons. It does not proprietary, like it's not like your secrets. The idea is if we use the pattern of nature of symbiosis of mycelial, sharing, and on this farm this worked, and on that farm that worked, and on that farm that worked. If we can find the patterns that seem to correlate with success, our hypothesis is that every piece of land is uniform and is unique. They're not uniform. And so one product or one thing should never be expected to work for all farms. And so we have to learn through the process of sharing together. And we've got a whole system happening behind the scenes of facilitating that. So every farm can be a research farm. We can all put in our metadata. No one can see who we are, but we can all see the results each of us is having. So we never have to trust a salesperson. We never have to trust an agronomist. We can actually use metadata, statistical analysis to see what's working on our neighbor farms, et cetera. So that's the vision, is we're not just defining quality, we're actually determining what causes it and supporting everyone in having access to that information, not from someone selling them stuff. Yes.
In looking at your data and whatnot, you're looking at just foods basically for us, but extending it to what we do as producers. What about looking at the individual grasses that the cows actually consume, and then how that affects the beef itself? And you've got the microflora in the soil, which the different plants, the more diverse crops, or the more crops.
So we did test the fodder.
Yes.
We did test the microbiome. We did test the soil. In this process, along with the human health trials, as part of what we did, and all that metadata is freely available, so you can see what worked and didn't work. We propose that we are a small educational nonprofit doing something that should be a global, governmental, massive, collaborative process. Who's heard of the Human Genome Project? Remember in the 90s? Those of us who are alive in the 90s? Right? Billions of dollars, massive global thing, 10 years, and they figured this thing out. Well, they didn't figure it out, but they figured something out. Like, we're a really small organization taking on a really big endeavor, saying, can we do a first proof of concept about how this should be done, publish it, inspire the market to move behind it, and then maybe the governments and the big nonprofits and research institutions will bring the hundreds of millions of dollars necessary to ask those important questions you're asking, right? There's a number of important questions here. Right now, we're just trying to say, hey guys, how about this as an idea? Can we do a first basic job of trying to find some stuff and get the process moving? Yeah, I mean, I would love to be sitting on hundreds of millions of dollars to do this thing properly, but I'm not,
There's a question here first, back here. So it was just actually another comment back to the producer side of things. You had said something about like making silage and helping cows finish. So like grain, we can ferment our grain.
Sprout is better than fermenting. For chickens, you'd want to sprout it before you ferment it.
Pigs, and that lowers. So as a producer, your cost of production on pigs and chickens, the biggest expense.
It looks like well-ensiled polyculture fodder can grow and finish a pig.
Absolutely.
Grass.
And I like
no grain.
I guess my point is like some of the data again allows management changes.
Yes.
And like we're buying a bigger chicken tractor and not quadrupling the amount of chickens, quadrupling the amount of space that they have to eat, and moving them twice a day. So giving them 8 times as much access to pasture while decreasing grain. And when it's soaked or sprouted, that is already a 50% cost in cost of production, or at least the cost of grain. You have a little bit management.
Grain's the biggest cost in raising chickens and raising pigs.
Right.
Grain's the biggest cost. So if we can figure out how to decrease costs, it'll improve economic viability, improve soil health. How about the basic mineralization of the soil? If you don't have the basic minerals in the soil, the quality of the fodder the chickens are eating is going to be poor. So I mean, it's all so intrinsically and beautifully interrelated. It comes back to soil health. It comes back to diversity. But it looks like there's some exciting opportunities here. And our thought is money drives the world, for better, for worse. And so if we can figure out a way to facilitate that, where people who buy food can choose your stuff over somebody else's because it's better, then that's going to inspire competition among us all to do a better job from a nutritional standpoint. And the more of us that are doing that, the more we can share and more we can learn, the less grain we need to buy, the less we're going to be needing, the industry that supports grain, the fertilizers, the seeds, the genetics, the machines, all that stuff, which is what agribusiness is founded upon, is unnecessary. And if we shift the market, we'll suck the life force out of agribusiness. This is the way we solve the problem of the Farm Bill, is we create a dynamic where we're no longer buying the products of agribusiness, so they no longer have the money to buy the senators, as far as I'm concerned. I think I'm out of time, but one more question. And then, yeah.
So if this takes off, which I hope it does, and it sounds like it really has legs, the value of the bio data is significant. What are you doing to protect the IP so it can't be taken over or purchased or used for private?
We've got everything that we've ever collected and everything we ever will collect in what's called open source. There's copyright and copyleft. So you can take the data and say, we are putting it into the commons for everyone. It can never be owned or controlled. And that's what we've done with everything, and we plan to do with everything. So anybody can use it if they want to, but they can never lock it up. That's the basic strategy. And it's foundational to everything we're doing. Yeah, there's legal structures around that, and there's a whole process. Copyright, a copyleft, open source. Anybody knows anything about that? GPL3, it's the whole thing. Yeah.
We gotta go. We gotta cut
my
this
time
off.
is up.
And
Thank you all for your attention.
And are you heading right out, or are you
I'm
around
planning
for
to
a
stay
minute?
through lunch.
Okay, great. So he's gonna stay through lunch. Please see him
My
if
wood
you need
stove
more.
has not been lit for a while, and it's getting damn cold in the house. And I did not bring the pipes. So
Thank you very much, Dan.
all right. This one.